Hello, students. Today we're going to discuss the part one of our second lesson, all about poetry. But before that, let me just give you a preview by providing this poem titled "Do Not Stand at Midnight," so that you can have a springboard on that lesson. This was written by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Before I finally show to you the content of this poem, I'll give you a little background on her. So she was born in Dayton, Ohio in 1905. She was forever associated with that. One of her most memorable poems. She had never written actually a poem in her life, but the obvious heartache of a young woman who stayed with her, whom I guess was so close to her, prompted her to put pen to paper. Actually, the poem was written on a paper shopping bag, very informal, yet the words just naturally came to her, where she explored the idea of life and death. It was shown to her friends, but was never actually formally published or given copyright. But it has been read countless times at funerals around the world in the 70 years since it was written. She did write other poems in her lifetime, but none were published. But she was primarily known for these 12 simple lines of verse that have meant so much to so many. So now let's proceed with the content or the text of the poem. Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am a thousand winds that blow. I am the diamond winds on snow. I am the sunlight, unripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I'm not there. I did not die. So in this poem, there were questions that follow for us to understand that. And in your with your classmates, when we first discussed this, we also answered this question. First question, what do you notice about the word choice the writer makes? Obviously, it's written in a quite formal, poetic way, considering the feelings of the readers or audience it's meant for. And basically, what's written there will try to make ordinary people understand the meaning, be consoled at the same time. Who is talking? The persona of the poem is the person who died, and the perceived message that person has for the living people whom he or she left was deeply meaningful and in consolation to their griefs. Next question. Sorry for the title, it should be third. Notice the structure of the poem. What kind of pattern do you notice in the poem? So basically, when we go back, there are a lot of repetitions, especially with the phrase I am, which was repeated 5 times in the first stanza and 3 times in the second stanza. And the same way in this poem, we have 2 stanzas with how many lines? We have two, three, 6 stanza, 6 lines in the first stanza, and same with the next one, which also has 6 lines. So later on in our discussion, we will get to know the name of this type of stanza, which is 6 lines. So that's for the structure. The fifth or the next question is, what might the title of the poem? So with the title itself, do not stand at the grave and weep. So it just simply conveys the idea that the people left, the people whom the person was gone in this life, wants to convey that they should not leave his or her grave. And technically, it gives an indirect preview of what the poem is to unfold to the readers. So let's now proceed with the lesson having that springboard. Our lesson is all about various elements, techniques, and literary devices in specific forms of poetry. So after going through this lesson, these are the expectations. First one is to identify the various elements, techniques, and literary devices in specific forms of poetry. Second is to appreciate some literary pieces which used various sorry, I will update this later. Third is to identify the various elements, techniques, and literary devices. Let's define now what poetry is. Poetry is a form of literature which allows the writers called to be poets. So meaning those who write poetry are called poets. You can call yourself poets when you write poem. And it is to express their thoughts, feelings, and emotions or ideas about a particular theme or topic. It's basically what poetry is. Let's discuss the characteristics of poetry. So we have 7 characteristics. First one is that it expresses creative thoughts in much briefer way than a short story or novel. Meaning to say, although it's briefer, shorter than a short story or novel, it is still successfully expresses creative thoughts. Second, it is that it has musical quality because of the sound devices that it uses or it possesses. Thereby, musical quality is one of its characteristics. Third one, it has structure, it has a body, it has a form or shape which we can recognize from one glance. For example, the stanza, the lines in the stanza, so on and so forth. That gives us an idea or impression that this piece is actually poetry because of that structure. Fourth one, it is used to express intense personal emotions and experiences. So using the elevated language is we can convey the most the highly emotional experiences and the emotions that come with it. In a pen, we can convey that, we can express them. Fifth, the content of a poem shows the universal truth and connotes a deeper meaning. So since it mentions universal truth, it means this truth, wherever we are, part of the earth, it's still truth. Nothing, regardless of tradition, culture, from any nationalities or nations, can make the truth untruth. So it's universal. Wherever we are, it's the truth that prevails. Number 6, it does not use everyday language. So we do not use our conversational everyday language, but instead we make use of the elevated ones, the poetic ones. We make use of metaphors in abundance, figurative language, etc. And last characteristic rather, is that it uses elements such as rhythm, imagery, verse, and meter, and poetic devices. Let's now proceed with discussing the elements of poetry. First one is the theme. When we say theme, it is the lesson about life or statement about human nature that the poem expresses. So it's actually what you can say about human nature, what you want the readers to learn about human nature. It is the overarching abstract idea or ideas being examined in the poem, or what is being discussed after everything you've read from the poem. What is the idea that floats that we can see, we can read between the lines of that poem? It's related to the concept of a moral or a lesson. How are the themes presented? First is by the feelings of the main character about the subject written about. Second is through the thoughts and conversations of different characters. These ones we do not need to really delve in deeper because it's kind of self-explanatory. Third, the experiences of the main character in the course of a literary work. Fourth, the actions and events taking place in our narrative. And how does it function? It actually binds together various other essential elements of the poem, being the theme, every element there is. All goes back, all supports the theme. It is the truth that exhibits universality. Again, universality was mentioned, universal truth, and it stands true for all, for people of all cultures. Third is that it gives readers better understanding of the main character's conflicts, experiences, discoveries, and emotions. Fourth is that it gives readers an insight into how the world works or human life can be viewed. Now let's discuss between the theme versus subject. What's the difference between the two? A poem subject is the topic, basically, or what the poem is all about. It could be one word or two words or a phrase. The theme, on the other hand, is an idea that the poem expresses about the subject or uses the subject to explore, meaning to say, if it's an idea, it's a complete thought about what the poem expresses. The subject of the poem expresses. It explores that in Do Not Stand in the Great Leap. What do you think are the subject in it? So the subjects are death and hope. The theme could be a person might die physically, but he or she still exists in nature or in spirit. Let's now go to the second element, which is tone. It suggests two attitudes, one concerning the people you are addressing as the poet or the audience. They are the one you're addressing. And the second one is your attitude towards the other or the thing you're talking about or the subject. How do you, what's your attitude towards the subject or what's your perception on the subject based on how you feel about it? Tone can also mean the general emotional weather of the poem. It's the one you're feeling while you're reading the poem as the reader. It is also the attitude expressed in a poem that the reader sees and feels, and the writer's attitude toward the subject or audience. These are the examples of tones: nostalgic, regretful, joyful, envious, persuasive, dry, playful, assertive, pessimistic, inspirational, sympathetic, ironic, conflicted, fearful, reverent, nervous, anticipating, derisive. So those are the examples of tone. Let's go to the discussion of the structure. A, structure. First one is form. So it usually refers to the structure that holds or gives shape to the poem. In a way, this is what it looks like to you on a page. So that's the form. Whatever you see on the paper forming a poem, that's the form. One place to begin is to simply describe what the poem looks like and how this influences how you read the poem. Let's take for an example this one, The Songs of an Empty House by Margaret Wilkinson. So we can see the form. We have here stanzas, the lines, we have rhyming words. Next is poetic line or line. So this is basically the group of words that form a single line of poetry. So if you have one stanza and it has 4 lines, each line is called poetic line or line. Example is this. Let's go to the discussion of meter. Meter is a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables like this one. These are examples of the first lines in Sonnet 118, if I'm not mistaken. And we have here the combinations of stressed and unstressed syllables conveyed in the words. So we have the unstressed having the symbol half U, and the stressed having the symbol slanted. So when it's unstressed, it has a weak emphasis, and while if it's stressed, it gives a strong emphasis. Meter happens when the stressed and unstressed syllables of the words in a poem are arranged in a repeating pattern. That's why we come up with meter when we see pattern, repeating pattern of the instances of stressed and unstressed syllables of the words in a poem. When poets write, they need to count out the number of stressed or the strong syllables and unstressed or weak syllables for each line. So with this one, the first line has how many combination of unstressed and stressed syllables? Shall I be in the first combination? Compare second combination. The two, third combination. A sum, fourth combination. Mercy, fifth. And if we go on with the second line, thou art first, more love, second, Leand, third, mortem, fourth, parade, fifth. So basically, in line 1 and line 2, it has a combination of 5 stressed and unstressed syllables. They are the same. They repeat the pattern throughout the poem. Let's go to foot, which is the unit of meter. Basing on the same example, we have here how many foot, or we also said or called it combination of stressed and unstressed syllables. So here again we have 5 foot. Each one is a unit that comprises the meter. So the first line has 5 foot or 5 feet. Okay, 5 feet. Foot can have two or three syllables, not just two, like this one. We also have three syllables. Now let's go to the type of feet. It is determined by the arrangement of stress and unstressed syllables. First one is what we call iamb or iambic in its descriptive form. Its arrangement is unstressed and stressed. And how does it sound? Da da. Because the second syllable receives the strong or the stressed syllable. The first syllable contains the unstressed one. Shall I compare da da? So that's iamb or iambic type of feet or foot. The second type of feet is trochee or trochaic. Its arrangement is stressed, then unstressed, which is totally similar or opposite to with iambic. How does it sound? Dada, as in pizza, having the stressed syllable in the first syllable and unstressed in the second syllable. So this is trochee again is opposite from iambic. The third one is what we call anapest or anapestic. It is kind of like iamb, but this time we have three syllables. It has unstressed, unstressed, stressed syllables. How does it sound? Da da da, as in get away. And the fourth one is dactyl or dactylic. It's actually the opposite now of anapest, having stressed, unstressed, and unstressed syllables. How does it sound? Da da da, as in honestly. Now, those are again the four types of feet. Iamb, trochee, anapest, and dactyl. Since foot is the unit of meter, let's now have the kinds of metrical lines. Let us also name the metrical lines based on the numbers of feet. To build a line of verse, poets can string together or combine together one of these types of feet, such as repetitions, are named like this. If the line contains one foot, whatever type, if it's iamb, trochee, anapest, or dactyl, we call it monometer. If the line has 2 feet, then it's diameter. If it has 3 feet, it's trimeter. If it has 4 feet, it's tetrameter. If it has 5, it's pentameter. If it's 6, it's hexameter. 7 feet on the line has it called heptameter. And if it has 8 feet on a line, it's called octometer. So if we combine the type of feet and the kind of metrical line, for example, if it has 5 iambic feet on a line, we call that iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter is actually the structure of a sonnet. Let's now go to stanzas since we're done discussing the lines or metrical lines. A stanza is basically the section of a poem which is named for the number of lines it contains. So if the stanza contains only 2 lines, it's called couplet. If it has 3 lines, triplet or tercet. If it has 4 lines, which is the usual kind, we call that quatrain. If it's 5, quintet. If it has 6 lines, sestet. 7 lines, septet. And finally, 8 lines, octave. Next one is what we call enjambment. So this is a technique when there is no written or natural pause at the end of a poetic line. Because normally when we read lines, so we pause at the end, signifying that we're moving on to the next line. But when we use this technique, there is no natural pause at the end because the word flow carries over to the next line, meaning the thought in the first line is not enough. It continues up to the next line, like this example. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love that alters when its alteration finds or bends with a remover to remove. So you see, it also affects how the poem is read. It affects the form of a poem as well. It can create a certain form relevant to a poem's content. Next one is verse. It can be seen either within or inside a poem and the other types of poems. Verse can also be in itself already a poem. It's a line in a traditional poetry that is written in meter. We have 3 types of verse. First one is the traditional form. It has rhyme and it has meter. The second one is free verse. It has no set meter. That's why it's free. It is to say that there is no rhyming scheme present and the poem doesn't follow a set pattern. Just like this example. The third one is the blank verse. It has no rhyming effect present or required, but it has an iambic pentameter, meaning it has a combination of unstressed and stressed syllables, and it has 5 iambic foot or feet in a line, making it iambic pentameter. It usually used for presenting passionate events and to create an impact on the reader. Shakespeare was an ardent user of blank verse. Like this one, To Be or Not to Be from Hamlet. Let's now proceed with the sound devices. B, sound. The first one is rhythm. It is the basic beat in a line of a poem. So, in effect, when we read that line, we feel the beat when we recite the line. And how is it created? By means of meter, or when we say meter again, it is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables and the unit of foot, created also through the rhyme, end rhymes, internal rhymes, alliteration, which is another sound device, and refrain. When we say refrain, we will talk about it later on. So this one is an example of the repetition or the refrain. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Okay, please notice of the parallelism in this line. I think I know. And whose woods? Next one. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So we have here the repetition of tiger, the rhyming words of bright and night. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep, by Robert Frost. So what we can see here is that we have the rhyming words deep, keep, sleep, sleep, as well as the repetition of lines. The third and the fourth line repeats. Let's now proceed with the end rhyme. It has same or similar sounds at the end of words that finish different lines. So we have here the same examples given. Deep, keep, sleep, sleep. How about the internal rhyme? Similar sounds within the words on the line. Like this one. Time, hide, mine, emphasizing the long I in these words. Rhyme scheme. You are already familiar with rhyme, but what about the scheme? A pattern of rhyme in a poem, usually end rhyme but not always. A quatrain or a stanza of 4 lines in which the second and fourth lines rhyme has the following rhyme scheme: A, B, C. Meaning to say, the rhyming words here are found on the second and fourth line, indicated by B, B. In this example, to be clear, we have here how many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The first and second having the first instance of rhyming words has the pattern AA. The third and fourth having the second instance of rhyming words at the end has the scheme BB. The fifth and the sixth lines, the third having the third instance of rhyming words, has the name CC, and the seventh and eighth having the same rhyming words with the first and the second repeats the first and second scheme, which is AA. So basically, the rhyme scheme is AA, BB, CC, AA. So that's rhyme scheme for you. Next one is assonance. It is the repetition of vowel sounds within words in a line, such as this. Children were nestled, all snug in their beds, emphasizing the vowel sound or letter E. Consonance is again the repetition of consonant sounds within words in a line, like the bubble, cool, deals, imperial, thunderbolt, sculpts, so. So we have the O sound or L, either within the words or still within the words in a line. Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words, such as Sarah, Cynthia, Sylvia, Stout would not take the garbage out. Actually, C is also part of that because it also sounds as S. So Sarah, Cynthia, Sylvia, and Stout is, or they are example of, it is an example of alliteration. And onomatopoeia, of course, you already know that these words do sound like their meaning, like the following: buzz, swish, hiss, gulp. And of course, refrain, a line or stanza repeated over and over in a poem or song, like this one. Repetition, either the sounds, words, or phrases are repeated to add emphasis or create rhythm. Parallelism is a form of repetition, like this one: the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. So, a repetition of some phrases and words. And finally, for part one, we have wordplay, which is literally to play with the sounds and meanings of a real or invented words. So we have here an example: claptrap, bombast, rhodomontade, hogwash, jargon, and rant. So some of these words are invented words, and only few can we can identify or understand. So that's it for this lesson. I hope the part of this lesson, I hope you understand. And if you have any questions, of course, anytime you may consult. Thank you.